On behalf of the League of Women Voters and your community television station, BCTV, I want to welcome you to a conversation with the candidates for the Select Board of Brattleboro. I'm Janet Kramer, moderator for our program, an informal discussion of questions I will ask of all candidates. While there won't be formal rules, I will do my best to make sure there is a fair balance of time among the candidates to respond to the questions. At the end of the program, each candidate will address you directly to ask for your vote. We're pleased to have an audience with us today, and I'll be happy to have them submit written questions that I will compile and use as we talk with the candidates. The town of Brattleboro has a 5-member select board, 3 people who are elected for 3-year terms and 2 people elected for 2 one-year terms, or 1-year term. This March 6th, we're going to be electing 1 person for a 3-year seat and 2 for 1-year seats. Continuing on the select board are Ken Schneck and Dora Babulis. With fewer candidates than last year, we're combining both the 3-year select board candidates and those for the 2 one-year positions. To my left are David Gartenstein and Catherine Turnus, candidates for the 3-year seat. And to my right, Dick DeGray and Chris Chapman, and I hope Bill Morlock. I had a phone call from Bill earlier in the afternoon saying he was tied up at his work in Springfield, so he may not make it this evening, but we'll hope so. As they answer the first question, I will ask the candidates to introduce themselves at the same time. We're going to start with the 3-year seats, and ensuring that everybody will have a chance to both be first and last and middle, I'll rotate around, trying to remember who I asked the question, last one first. So starting with the first question and starting with Dick, my apologies, David Gartenstein. What are your reasons for running for this select board position? What special skills, interests, activities, or experience would you bring to the job? For incumbents, what has been your experience in your current service on the board? And a follow-up, do you think you're seen as representing a particular segment of the Brattleboro community?
Thank you, Janet. I want to thank you for moderating this forum this evening, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring the event. I also want to thank everybody who is watching the program this evening and who's planning to participate in the elections on March 6th. I'm running for re-election to the Brattleboro Select Board for a 3-year term because I feel like my work on the Select Board is only beginning. We've faced a lot of issues over the past year, and the Select Board has worked hard to maintain stability and solid provision of services through some very difficult times. We began with traffic bottled up on Main Street, and we were able to get the traffic lights adjusted so traffic is flowing well. In the spring, we experienced the Brooks House fire, and we got to see in action our fire department working in a cohesive manner with other entities from neighboring communities to prevent much greater damage downtown. We experienced some very significant crime both in Brattleboro and in neighboring communities over the summer, and then Hurricane Irene hit with the devastation that it wreaked throughout the town and throughout the community. All throughout, people in town and surrounding communities came together and worked to repair our community and bring us together as a whole. It's one of the really special things about Brattleboro. I hope to continue my work with the Select Board for the next 3 years. There are some priorities I'd like to focus on. I want to make sure that essential services are being provided in a way that properly reflects the cost of those services and make sure that we're getting revenue from the right sources to pay for the services we provide. We're going to be facing this year requests to rebuild both the police and the fire facilities. We need to look at those very carefully and very seriously to make sure that we have adequate and solid services to protect our citizens for the near term and for the long term. Janet, I'm not really sure that I represent any particular constituency. I'm a deputy state's attorney in my day job. I've served on the Development Review Board for 9 years. I was on the town school board. I was on the high school board. And now, if reelected, I'll be serving on the Select Board for my second, third, and fourth years. I've tried to bring solid, moderate management to town government, working with administration and fellow Select Board members, and I thank you for your vote.
Thank you. Catherine, you're running also for the 3-year term.
Yes, I am. This has been my first shot at being on the Select Board. I did run last year for the 1-year seat. I will bring to the Select Board my 4 years of being on the Development Review Board. I am on the Friends of the Library Board. At this point in time, I think that I would consider myself a part of the community that I feel needs to be addressed, and that is the people who are living on very limited income, and not just seniors, but as well as families. I really would like to see us put more effort into, as what David said about crime. We do have an amazing community justice center that not only is into restorative justice, but also into arbitration for particular things that people might get upset about. And that is something that's handled through Ms. Shriver. If, say, for instance, somebody decides that they don't like the fact that you is using their snow blower and they get all upset about it, it can be arbitrated before it goes into any kind of legal system. I am very, very concerned about the educational part, the education in Brattleboro. I would like to see more young people getting involved in what we're doing right now. I would like to see us pull them in. At the age of 18, they are able to register to vote. It's about time that we see them up here being part of this process.
Actually, there's going to be a question about that later. So you've kind of said that you think you are representing a particular segment of Brattleboro community, those who are living on less income, both elders and families as well. Anything more you want to say before I turn to Chris and Dick to Greg?
No, I think that'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Dick.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, League of Women Voters. I know this isn't live, and this will be broadcast within the next few days. I'm the Wiley veteran on the board. I've been here for 6 years. What motivated me 6 years ago was the financial difficulties that the town was in. We had deficits. We owed money in our water and sewer system. That really motivated me to get involved. I'd been a finance committee member and a town meeting member before that, so I've been very active in the community. And today I'm proud to say that we have over $1 million in the bank. We just paid $400,000 for a fire truck and paid cash for it, saving the town thousands and thousands of dollars on interest payments. My strength on the board is, I think, my oversight on financial issues. I believe that I've been a good leader for our board. We have a very cohesive board that is very collegial. They get along, they debate. They may not always agree, but they are very respectful to one another. We have many challenges in the community, and we often hear about the grand list. The grand list affects what we pay in taxes, along with what we do in our spending. The board has been very diligent, not only this year, but in years past, of how we spend your money. It's our money also. And I would much rather spend money on things I'd like to do than things in town. So I'm very mindful of people, affordability of what we are. Vermont is becoming unaffordable to a lot of people. And so we in this municipality are very cognizant of that. And I think that going through this budget process, several of my colleagues on the board were very mindful of that. Department heads didn't get raises this year. That was very difficult, given the yeoman's job that they did last year. With all the catastrophes that happened in our community, it was very hard to sit there and say, we can't give you a raise. I'm proud to say that the board, as liquor commissioners, really took a stand against bar rooms that were unsafe environments and rejected a liquor license for an establishment in town because we felt it was unsafe. That was unprecedented here in Brattleboro, and I'm proud of my colleagues for making that stand. And it sent a message to other bar rooms and restaurants that you need to control your patrons and that they're not boxing arenas. One of the things that I'd also like to say that economic development is a key issue for our community. I said last night in another forum that getting the Brooks House back online is critical to our fragile downtown. It is bad enough that the economy is so weak, but having that vacant space with very lost stores. Yeah, I talk about the bookseller, where people truly miss that, the Dragonfly, and several other stores that were there. They were mainstays in downtown, that people came to Brattleboro to shop in those stores. They are missed, and they have a residual effect on the rest of the downtown. So I'm going to do everything I can to help the Brooks House get back up and running within the next 12 to 18 months. I'd like to leave you with the fact that Janet had asked, what constituency do I feel that I represent?
If any.
If any. I'd like to think I represent all. I know that you all don't agree with me on every issue, and you know what? You're not supposed to. We all shouldn't look in one direction. I think that that's dangerous. But at the end of the day, you need to know that I work extremely hard for our community. I have for 6 years. I will continue to do that for the next 12 months. I am truly committed to serving one more year. I believe that's what I have left in the tank. And if I didn't think I could do it with the same energy that I've had in the past 6 years, I wouldn't have run. So I would appreciate your vote, all of you out there, because I feel like I represent all of you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Chris?
Thank
You want me to
Janet.
repeat the question, because it's been a while since I read it, or you?
Well, let
Here's that.
me just repeat back to you what I recall the question is. Why am I running? What am I bringing to the position?
Exactly.
What service on the board would I like to discuss? And do I represent any special?
Segment of Brattleboro.
That's right. Okay, thanks. Well, I'm rerunning because running in the first place last year was the right thing to do. I had not had in mind to run at all. A friend of mine in Brattleboro, whom I respect greatly, approached me one day and said, hey, it's your turn. You can do this. Both my kids were grown and out of the house, with the exception of my daughter, who was in her last year at college. And I thought, this is nuts. It's nutty. I mean, it's too much. I'm already busy at work. I just have a busy life. But I thought about it. I'm on a number of other boards, and I could say the same about them. And I've gotten a lot out of being on other boards and nonprofit boards. So I thought, well, okay, I'll put my hat in the ring, and maybe I'll get voted out, not elected, but I will be able to say, well, I gave it a whirl. I got this far last year in these candidate forums and realized, something, if I'm going to run, I should really play to win. If I'm going to do it, I should make a commitment. So I did. And I found myself being nominated for vice chair when I did win. And I didn't any longer have the feeling, take this cup from me. It was, okay, what's next? And what a year. What a year with all that David and Dick have recited here. What I have found was this is not a thankless job. People had said to me, are you nuts? What a thankless job. Why would you do that? And I thought, well, I should do it because this is the way a democratic society works. And I feel even more strongly that that is indeed the case. I have found it to be very satisfying to have a say, to think about the issues and come to the meetings and state a case, and to be responsive to people's criticisms, to their interests, to their requests, to their concerns, and make an intelligent contribution. Because in the end, when you stick your stick in the water and a certain way, the right way, you are going to change the current a little bit, and that's what I have done. And I want to do that again. Why am I running? The town management and its committees are excellent. You should see. I mean, really, people don't see in the newspapers or even on the radio the broad spectrum of contributions that people make as volunteers in the town on the committees. It's very heartening. It can bring you tears to your eyes, actually, when you think about the dedication that people have to very limited committee work, but press as they do, they make solid contributions. It doesn't matter if it's the tree committee or the planning commission, development review board, it's all important. And I want to continue to be part of that team. I have enormous respect for the town management, the town manager, or department heads, and the people who work for them. They are really models of dedication. I want to be associated with that. I want to be associated with that spirit. I want to be a part of that. Now, what about myself? I've heard years ago, something that stuck in my head, if you want to get something done, you give it to the busiest person. Well, I'm already busy. I have a full-time job. I play ground crew to my performing wife's career. I've got the kids, I've got the house, prepare the shutters, mow the lawn, do the garden. But there's also the other nonprofit work that continues. I'm on the board of the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm increasingly proud of that organization. The walk-in clinic, I've been on that for years also, formerly on a number of other boards, Vermont Jazz Center, Brattleboro Music Center. I'm on 2 committees of the Vermont Supreme Court, among them Probate Rules Committee, which is important to the line of work I am, but I was also invited to be on the court's Professional Responsibility Board, which hears complaints about attorneys, and the panel there puts together sanctions as appropriate. There's that, plus the exchange students. You want to contribute to world peace, you do it one kid at a time. And so, yes, I'm busy, but I've learned to compartmentalize. I have not learned to be brief in my speaking.
Well, I was about to comment on that,
Yes,
because there are other questions I want to go on to.
And I'll answer the last of your questions extremely briefly. I represent all of Brattleboro. I don't know how to represent one constituency without being unfair to the rest.
All right. Thank you all. And the way I want to do it is to start next with Catherine, go through Dick and Tris, and then back to David. We'll rotate around that. And the question about apathy seemed to me a very important question to ask next. Last year, participation in voting for town officials was poor. My memory in a meeting with Ken Schneck was that it was 6%. What would you do to counter voter apathy? Do you think it represents general approval of what is happening in town? Do voters know what the Select Board is doing on their behalf? Are you active in any Get Out the Vote initiatives? So it's kind of a broad question. We'll start with you, Catherine.
I don't think that apathy in itself is strictly a Brattleboro problem. I think it is a national problem. Just the amount of people who vote in a national election is appalling. What I had said earlier when I had said about the younger voters, I really think that it's time to make them more aware of what their government does on their select board. I can remember when I was in school, we had what we called civics, where we learned everything about the government. We learned about the Constitution, about the Bill of Rights, about voting, about how a bill was made. and processed. I really would like to test that out in our high school with our 18-year-olds, with 18-year-olds that can register to vote, to see just how much they actually know about their government. To me, it seems to be that if you're going to have adults at this point in time where only 6% of them vote, and obviously the other, 94% just say, I don't want to go. Everything's the same. They're all the same. Why vote for one? I'll vote for the worst of the two or the best of the two or whatever. You really have to educate people. You have to educate them. And I, as a member of the league since I was 19 years old, which was a real long time ago, have give them credit because the league has been responsible for educating people for years about voting and about the issues that are facing the government in their state, in their town, and federally. And they really should be known more.
Dick?
Thank you.
Same question.
Thank you, Janet. I wish I had that answer for you. Tuesday night, I was at the BUHS District 6 meeting. We were voting on a $27 million, I want to emphasize, $1 million budget. There was 89 people there, 56 from Brattleboro. How disappointing. But you can't make people go to the polls. You cannot educate people. On Wednesday, I was downstairs shaking hands with people coming in to pay their taxes. I shook one gentleman's hand and he said, "We have an election going on?" I mean, I almost fell to my knees. What am I doing wrong here? What am I doing wrong? I appreciate the initiative of Ken Schneck in trying to get out the vote. But at the end of the day, it's personal responsibility. As so many things in our life are, personal responsibility. We make it so easy for you, but we cannot force you to vote. We have early voting. All you have to do is make a phone call to the town clerk's office. They will send you a ballot. You don't even have to leave your home. All you have to do is put a stamp on it and mail it back. I mean, aside from going to people's houses, bringing the ballots to them, I don't know what the answer is. It is disheartening.
I
It
had
really-
asked whether people's non-participation had to do with their feeling pretty comfortable about what's happening.
There's a part of in the other forum again last night, I'm appreciative that Bill and Catherine are running. Last year, we had a multitude of candidates. Was it because there were open seats? And this year, the 3 incumbents are running? Or is it because people are generally satisfied with the work that the board has been doing? I can tell you that I haven't heard any complaints. I mean, people complain about issues, but people are not complaining about the board. And you're never going to stop people from complaining about issues. They should talk to you about issues. If something's bothering them, that's what they do. So I feel that the board that is in place, with no disrespect to Bill or to Catherine, has been a very responsive board to issues facing the town, and I feel that that's one of the reasons why there is a lack of candidates running. And, I'm supportive of Christopher and David because I've seen the work that they have done and the time that they have put in, and it is time-consuming. And I wonder if people really think about, okay, do I want to get involved in something like that? Do I want to be criticized? Because there are people who criticize board members and make it personal. If you want to criticize a board member about an issue, that's fine. That's part of the job. But when you make personal attacks on anybody on any board, it is so inappropriate, and I think that that's one of the #1 reasons why people aren't coming out in running for positions in town. Local elections are becoming as vicious as the national elections. I've been watching those Republican debates, and it's like cannibalism. I mean, it's really disheartening to say that's what our educational system has evolved to.
I'd like to give Chris a chance to answer.
Thank you.
this.
So I hope that you come out and vote. Make me say that 6%, it doesn't cost us anything to vote. 50% would be a laudable goal this year, wouldn't it, Christopher?
I'd say it would. You know, Janet, I don't have an answer for you on that. I've studied history, modern, 20th century history when I was in college. And I was, it made me just scratch my head about what to do about this sort of thing. I do think there is a grain of truth in that there's complacency about local government because I think a couple of things. One, people know that there are professionals running this town. I don't believe people feel disfranchised because of money in politics concerning Brattleboro. There isn't any. I think I might have spent more than anybody else last year. Two guys contributed $100, and I bought a box ad in the Reformer on the front page. It said, "Vote for Christopher Chapman, paid for by Christopher Chapman." That was it. That was my war chest, and I exhausted it. We don't have that problem. And we have a pure democracy here as a result. You have to be elected on your merits, and you're naked in front of the public here. You make a stupid statement, it'll come right back at you. And if you make a statement from the heart that a lot of people disagree with, you'll hear about it. People do, however, express gratitude. I was saying earlier that some people said to me, it's a thankless job, and I was surprised that people have stopped me on the street to say thank you. So it is not a thankless job. It is a very interesting, very complex and difficult job. It's broad, it's deep, and it's minute. But that's part of the challenge of it. And if you're, I guess you could call me a technocrat, this is the job to have. It's all of that. And as much as you can swallow, you will be shoveled right your way. I think the answer is to simply talk it up just as though you were selling something on television or in the media. The message is one you have to compete for. You have to compete with the public's attention. Talk it up. Do what you're doing tonight with League of Women Voters, getting the word out, putting the candidates on the line and getting them in front of people. Are people comfortable with what is happening? I think that people in general are uncomfortable where the economy is going. I think people in general are horrified by what they've seen in the current primaries on the federal level. I think that people love their Congress people and hate Congress. And there's something wrong with that picture. It just says to me that they just don't know enough, so the message has not gone out well enough. Talk it up, start locally, start with yourself, start with the people you know. That's where the answer is going to come from. And I will repeat a caution I made last night it was based on my study of 20th century Western history, and that is that if we did have an enormous turnout, 95, 98%, it would not be because we have a society that feels it's important to vote. We would have such a vote because people would be desperate to have some kind of change going on. It would be a signal of crisis. So conversely, I think there is not a feeling of crisis here as far as local government goes. I think people feel that there are other larger issues which they can't do a lot about that discourage them from discourage them from participating. I think it's all too human to be overwhelmed by a multitude of issues. So I think it's a modern problem. It's a byproduct of a very, very complex, data-heavy society. And so in answer to a complex question, I'd say the solution starts with the simple one. Get out there, ask your friends to vote for you, ask your friends to vote for me. I endorse all the incumbents here. I love this board. It's one that doesn't bicker. It's professional. I find it enormously satisfying to debate people I respect. You know, when we grow up, we really want the respect of people whom we respect. I think that's a fundamental human need. I think it's a mature need. It's a need of a mature mind. I have that. I have that desire, and I think I've gotten my wish.
Thank you, Christopher.
Okay.
David?
Janet, I think that there's an argument to be made that, waiting for the camera, come on, hi. I think that there's an argument to be made that the apathy in our political system starts from the fact that it looks very much like our government, our national government, is broken. Bickering, brinksmanship, political gamesmanship seem to rule the day in Washington, D.C. And I think that filters down throughout the country, throughout our states and our cities and our towns. And Chris is right. We like our individual elected officials, but we feel that our government is broken. And it sometimes feels like there's very little ability to change what's going on at the national level. It seems to me that besides encouraging people to vote, participation in local government is really a way that we can start rebuilding the strength of our government and rebuilding the strength of our democracy. We have here in Brattleboro people who serve on the Select Board, people who serve on local committees, and it's the participation by the citizens in town that makes our government strong. And while I encourage everybody to vote, I even more encourage people to participate. If you have an interest in any of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis, the tree committee, the zoning committee, the planning committee, the recreation committee, agriculture, on and on, there are spots available for people to participate in local government. People may think that it's a funny thing to say, but I've been participating in local government for the better part of the last 15 or 20 years, and it's made my life richer. I ask my wife from time to time whether it's taken away from our family life, and I really find that it hasn't. It's made my life richer, it's provided an example to my family, and it's been a way to give back to the community. So what I can do most is to encourage people to participate.
Thank you. As I recall, one of the more participatory discussions had to do with recycling. And Dick, let's start with you. What is your position on recycling? Would you continue the curbside pickups? Would you continue funding the recycling coordinators? Why and why not?
Well, this is, I'm going to have to strap my partner down here because this is an issue that he really is excited about. I was a supporter of pay-as-you-throw. There was a lengthy debate 2 years ago about pay-as-you-throw. I think at town meeting it consumed about 3 hours. It passed. It was somewhat controversial. We went to a town-wide vote. It was defeated. And so at this present time, I don't support pay-as-you-throw. But I realize, and actually I was at a meeting on Monday with the representatives of our district, our legislative leaders, and Sarah Edwards said that we have 18 months left of shelf life in the dump where we bring our trash. Now, at some point, that's going to have a residual effect on expense. At some point, I believe the municipality is probably going to be pay-as-you-throw. I'm excited about what the coordinators had done this year in increasing recycling. I was extremely supportive of some of the ordinance changes that they brought forward with, but their work is done. It is all about priorities and money. Do I think that the coordinating, should we have a coordinating position? Not at this point. We're going to reconstitute the committee. The committee somewhat fell apart because we had 2 coordinators. And so, when you are a volunteer, you want to feel like you have some input. And I'm not sure why those committee members kind of fell off, but I think that there are people eager to serve. One of the things about our trash system where people often lose sight of is that we don't get a la carte tax bills. And so 50% of the town doesn't receive trash pickup. If you're an industrial business or if you're an apartment house with five apartments or more, you don't receive trash pickup. But guess what? And you have to pay for trash pickup. So, I mean, that's not fair. And it's a fairness, there's a fairness issue there for me. That if it wasn't subsidized, if you took the subsidy that's businesses were paying, that because they have to pay for dumpsters for their tenants or their businesses, and you took that money out, trash pickup would really be expensive. So it is a huge cost to the town. I'm supporting where we are at the present time. It's not going to change next year. We briefly discussed it this year in the budget process. I know Christopher's excited about revisiting it. And so, and I understand that. I understand that. But it was a controversial issue, and if we hadn't voted on it within the last, 16 months, maybe we would have revisited it, but I didn't believe that it was prudent to do so maybe in 3 or 4 years. Who knows? I think that the cost of what it costs for our trash pickup is going to dictate what happens with us, whether we get to pay as you throw. Again, it's about responsibility.
I want to make sure everybody has
Yes.
a chance to respond.
Yeah.
Chris?
All right. Thanks for the home run pitch, Janet. Here's what I have to say about that. The first question was, should we continue with curbside pickup? And the
Yes.
second one was,
Would you continue funding the recycling coordinators? Why and why not?
okay. Curbside pickup. Yes, I think we should, because our town is too big to have individual responsibility for taking your stuff to the landfill. It would just be too crowded to handle all the traffic for people, and it's a waste of gasoline. It's much more efficient in terms of the town's carbon footprint to send people around in trucks with special equipment to do this job. That's the best way to do it. If you want to break down that issue, I'm actually not all that well prepared to speak about commercial pickup and rental house pickup. I think it's actually a distraction from the larger issue. And the larger issue has to do with the fact that costs of trash pickup are going to only rise over time. Already the tipping fee for the coming fiscal year, according to our contract with Triple T, is going to go up from 94 cents a ton to 99. That's in addition to the 6 cents that we pay to the state for each ton. It will be a 5.3% increase to Triple T for the town. The commercial landfill is going to fill up eventually. We've all known that. And we've got the wake-up call from the representative on Monday at the legislative breakfast. 18 more months, and suddenly you can expect the graph of the costs to go like that. Who wants that? When we are spending $300,000 a year for tipping with trash, for the most part, which does not have to incur that cost, were we to recycle and compost. We can do this in our town. We all have the wherewithal to do that. And you could start with a reading of a children's book, Dr. Seuss's book, The Lorax. Do you remember what the theme of the Lorax was? There is no such place as away, as in throwing things away. After a while, you can't put stuff away. We filled up our landfill. We knew it was coming. It happened. It actually got accelerated because of a problem there a decade or so ago. And so now we send stuff away to elsewhere in our little state. That place is going to clog up, and we're going to compete with places like Northampton. What are we going to do? Where are we going to send it? Maine? At what cost per ton? And if that's not a worry to you, let me pose this. If we have to pay more for trash when we're trying to keep a lid on expenses, what do we have to give up? Let me recite what we gave up this year that we could have spent $300,000 on. We gave up a police car. David was reciting the crime history of Brattleboro for the last year. How do you think that I feel about having to say no to the police chief? You asked for 2 cars, we're going to give you 1 for the sole reason that we can't afford to give you that new car. We can't afford it. You could say, we're not going to pay for the new grader that the town needs. We're going to have perhaps 1 if the second one the older one breaks down at age 17. Because we are not willing as a town to recycle. We want to spend that kind of money on trash so that we can have life that's a little more convenient instead of buying stuff that we really need to make this town safe, navigable, and attractive to residents and new business. You tell me, what's wrong with this picture?
I think we have just found one of the solutions to voter apathy, at least in the sense that this is where government really affects people. I want to
Yes.
give David and then Catherine the chance to respond to this.
Sure.
David.
Thank you, Janet. I would not just continue, but would like to see curbside pickup expanded. As part of the work of the recycling coordinators over the last year, we at least have the potential on the horizon to see curbside compost pickup as well. It's been my personal experience that dividing the waste streams that are generated from my house results in only a tiny bit of trash being picked up weekly. I visit the Project Cow dumpster weekly, and it is the most significant weight of trash that's generated in my house. And if we have curbside compost pickup accompanied by curbside recycling pickup and trash, hopefully the amount of waste that's going to the landfill will be reduced almost to nothing. The broadest possible recycling is also something that we want to encourage. There still are types of waste that we're generating in our homes, plastic wrap, tin foil, and the like, that have to go to the dump because they can't go anywhere else. And expanded recycling, expanded use of composting will, I think, result in less and less going to the landfill. My concern with pay-as-you-throw, and I wasn't on the board at the time, my concern with pay-as-you-throw had to do with the bottom line fact that taking trash pickup out of the town budget was really just a cost shift, not elimination of cost. We still, in individual homes, need to pay for trash pickup one way or another, either through the municipality or through individual homes. And my concern with pay-as-you-throw was the possibility and the likelihood that we would be taking that expense out of the town budget, and then rather than cutting our tax rate, using the money on other things, and then individual homes would still be burdened with that cost. So I think that what we need is to address the waste generation and disposal of the waste in the most orderly manner so that it's being done in a cost-effective and environmentally sound way.
Would you continue to fund the recycling coordinators?
I think the recycling coordinator positions have already ended as of December, because it was actually on a calendar year rather than on a budget year cycle. And I absolutely commend the work that the recycling coordinators did. They increased awareness, helped to increase the recycling rate, helped to set us on a path for the future for a better way to deal with the trash that's generated in town. I agree with the other 2 select board members that adding those positions back in at this time isn't something that's necessary.
Catherine.
As a person who not only recycles, but I compost, and I don't use the use cow because I take my compost to, I have a garden with friends of mine in West Chesterfield, and we use it for our garden. And I thought about that. It would be really nice if we could use our compost that we gathered for a community garden in Brattleboro. I was originally against pay-as-you-throw, and then kind of wavered a little bit that, yeah, maybe it's not such a bad idea. But then I realized that one of the things that made me not be for it, and I'm a renter, I don't own my own home. I live in an apartment building that has several apartments, and was pay-as-you-throw was coming through. I was living up at Morningside. And it was a very difficult situation because you had 160 people there, 160 condos up there. And what were you going to do with 160 people who were going to leave all of those bags outside? And that was a whole different kettle of fish. And then I got down to the point where I realized that the cost of the actual bags that were going to be used, to me, was excessive for people who were on limited incomes. Because personally, I can get recycled garbage bags in a roll that I have 100 to a roll, and they are made from recyclable plastic, that I can spend maybe, you know, like $13 for an entire roll of garbage bags, as opposed to what they were charging, which was something like $3 a bag. I mean, that's for somebody, you know, for some people. And David is right. If you educate people, if you do composting, if you have the recycling, then what goes into that garbage bag is not as, it doesn't take up as much space. But until, you know, people are educated to do that, then we just have to continue to continue the educational process, which both Moss and Cindy have put into place. And I think it's a really great idea. And yeah, I have to say that, no, I don't think it would be a good idea to continue the coordinator position at this time.
Okay. We've certainly heard of several major things that were not possible this year, as well as many of the major disasters in town. What came to my mind as I was writing this question were the major disasters of Tropical Storm Irene, the Brooks House fire, the flooding of Melrose Terrace, and the effective loss of 5 of the one-story elderly housing buildings there. With those, what are your priorities for building or renovation projects in Brattleboro? What do you think the Select Board's role is in selecting, advocating for, and leading these projects? Chris, we'll start with you, and then we'll work back.
Well, thanks, Janet. I think the first priority is getting the Brooks House back on its feet. That's where we have the the biggest issue affecting the most people. It's complex. We might need a partnership of some kind with the owner in order to inject more capital into what's needed there. It could be but I'd like to point out that where there's disaster, there's also opportunity. What opens up is a silver lining. You know, the broken egg has wonderful things inside it, and it could be that locating the new educational center that the governor mentioned in his budget speech in that building would be a great idea. I see the opportunity to build mixed housing in that building instead of having just a one income level type housing there, to really make an ideal mix that urban theory says is most healthy for a community. That's a big deal. Another piece is the latches. I don't know what we could actually do for that, but a theater is a local jewel. You remember that our third one-year candidate, Mr. Morlock, indicated last night one of the things he's most proud of in his work in Springfield is contributing heavily toward the success successful renovation of a theater up in Springfield where he works with the Housing Authority. And another is helping the New England Circus Arts Group successfully build on Elm where the derelict chemical building is located. I understand that we're going to have demolition of that building this year, and then these folks want to move in. That organization is tremendous. It brings a lot of students to town who need housing, and they shop here. They eat at the restaurants and so on and so forth. It's an ideal low carbon footprint, high impact, long-term benefit for the local economy and the children of the community who study there. It's perfect. It's beautiful. I want to see, well, where to begin? My goodness, Janet. I wrote a list. It's long. It's long. I'm just going to overdo it again. We're talking about recovery projects, yes? Okay. Let me put my foot on the third rail, and that is low-income housing here in Brattleboro. We do need to find a way long-term to get people out of the floodplains. These are our community's most vulnerable citizens. Who do I represent? I represent all of Brattleboro. You are heartless not to see these folks feeling powerless and being literally overwhelmed by flood. Something's really wrong with this picture. I'd love to see and be a part of getting the housing situation straightened out so that it's satisfactory to them and something that the town can be proud of in the mix that is created when a well-done plan is put in place.
So that sort of goes to that part of the question. What do you think is the Select Board's role in selecting, advocating for, and leading these projects?
Wow. Well, there's the grant process and really helping good grant applications get into the hopper and come out the other end successfully, I think is really the most effective, most practical, most immediate thing that we can do. The grants need to come from the folks who specialize in these things, the various boards. That's what I would like to see happen, and that's where I personally, with my vote, could be most effective in making it possible for these improvements to happen.
Thank you. David.
The damage from the floods that came with Irene, I think impacted disproportionately vulnerable populations within our community. Glen Park, Mountain Home, Melrose, all suffered very significant damage. We've lost homes in those areas. We've got people who are still relocated, who have not been able to move back at this time. We need to focus on making sure that that housing stock is made available. Catherine's absolutely right when she talks about the need for affordable housing. We need to make sure that those homes and people living in those areas have safe places to live. It's unfortunate that the flooding impacted the plans that the Housing Authority had started to put in motion for redevelopment of the aging housing stock that they manage. The Housing Authority is going to be making presentation to the public and to the Select Board about their plans going forward. And we look forward as Select Board members to working with the Housing Authority to plan going forward to make sure that affordable housing for everybody who needs it is available in a safe place. That's my primary priority, making sure that funding is available for that and working to achieve that, I think should be all of our goals.
It's interesting because that tracks another one of the questions that came from the audience. Do you see any housing needs in Brattleboro? If so, what are they? So I think you've covered that very
right.
well.
Right.
Catherine.
This is this is one of my so to get on your soapbox and get carried away with. I have been on the Housing Authority affordable housing list and on the Wyndham Trust list for the last 2 years. There is nothing available at this time. I really think that we have space here for people, and I'm not just talking about, Byron Stokey said this in something that he talked to the Citizens Breakfast about. This isn't, people have a really kind of a screwed idea of what affordable housing, what we're talking about. We're not talking about just seniors. We're not talking about people who are on limited incomes. We're talking about families. We're talking about people that we want to move here and live here who can't afford to do that because they can't afford a home to do it in or an apartment to do it in. As far as what the Select Board can do, there's 2 things that I can think of right off the top of my head, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. We really have to revisit the fluvial erosion ordinance. It has to be looked at again. It was defeated by not this present sitting Select Board, but the one before, and it's got to be looked at again. And then what we've got coming up is the town plan. It's got to come before the Select Board, and I'll tell you honestly, I stand behind that camera in the planning board meetings, and I'll tell you, I'm really impressed with the housing section and the environmental section and the transportation section. Every one of these things have to be looked at and thought about very carefully because they will affect this town for the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Dick.
Thank you. You know, when you talk about prioritizing, the Brooks House had over 60 apartments in it that was lost in that fire. And there were 58 apartments that were occupied that we had to find space for, and the community came together and found that space. You know, the difficult issue about Melrose Terrace is where it's located. It's a safety issue. Actually, Catherine brought up last night that rebuilding in an area where it is going to flood again. It has had issues there for years and years, and how many times have we evacuated some of the most vulnerable people in our community that live there? We have to look at that. We have to say, if we're going to do this, we need to make sure this is safe. And we need to make sure that the money that we put in, because it's getting harder and harder to come by, that it's not going to get washed downstream. It's an emotional issue. It was a very emotional issue for the town and for the residents. It was played out in the papers, which I was most disappointed as the chair of the board. But we have come together. We need to work together. And I'm a supporter of affordable housing. You look at the Richards Building up in West Brattleboro. I was a sitting member on the board. I was chair of the board. And people have short-term memories. There was 4 board members here that evening when we were going to vote on that project. That project was going to get voted down. It was going to be a 2-2 vote. I postponed that vote because I thought it was an important enough issue to have all 5 board members. And when the 5th board member came back from vacation, we voted on that, and it passed 3-2. Quite controversial. But I supported it. I support affordable housing. But we all need to work together. And Catherine says other issues besides affordable housing. Transportation. How do we get people around? You know, we haven't talked about the co-op building, but I'm excited about the co-op building because it's going to bring people to the downtown. Businesses downtown are struggling mightily. We are fortunate to have what we have. I don't know how they're doing it. It's smoke and mirrors. Getting people to our downtown, having people live downtown is important to the viability of our community. Affordable housing. Not all affordable housing should be subsidized housing. but we have to be able to rehab buildings or build new, and we need to add to the grand list. Because if you have all this subsidized housing, they don't pay full fare. Somebody's paying for that. And there's a fairness issue, and there are people in our community who are concerned about that. And you just can't turn a blind eye because you want to support one entity of the town. You know, we talk about we represent everybody in the community. And you make a you make a vote, and sometimes people are happy with you, and sometimes they're not. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure wherever we do our housing stock, it's in a safe place where we're not going to have the catastrophe that we had in the past year. And the other thing that I would say about funding, there's grant funding, there's also CDBG money that the town has that it can contribute to housing stock when programs go.
Can you translate that for those who don't know the...
Well, there's a fund of money, and actually the Housing Authority has accessed that money, and the
But just
Wyndham Land
the
Trust.
meaning of the initials.
Community development
Community
block
development
grants.
block grants?
Block
Okay,
grants,
great.
yes. So there's money out there. There's planning. There's a planning grant that the town is looking into. There's mitigation grants that we're looking into. So, you know, David's right. The most vulnerable people in our community were hit by Irene, and we need to do everything to make sure that we don't put people back into harm's way. And we need to make sure that we keep our emotions in check. I know that it was an emotional issue, but at the end of the day, we're all neighbors. And we came together in a very difficult time, a couple times this past year. And we need to remember that in saying that we all have one common goal, and to work together to make Brattleboro what it is. And so you have to try to pull yourself back for it. And that's one of the things I've learned as a select board member. Take the emotion out of the issue and deal with the issue. And I think that we're on the right road there, and I hope to continue on that path. Thank you, and that was a very good question.
Well, question that I've never been able to ask before because things have changed so much. And that how has social networking changed the way you function as an elected representative of Brattleboro? What are the benefits, the negatives? I believe there was a recent decision not to allow Twitter messages into select board meetings. Please explain that. Let's start with you, David.
One of our select board members this year began bringing his computer to the board meetings and had the computer open during meetings. Now, having the computer open on the table and using it like a notebook is a very appropriate way to proceed. I get a select board notebook, it's full of paper, I give it back, the paper's recycled at the end of the meeting. Ken gets his agendas and his underlying documents on the computer. He reads them on the computer, and then that information is stored digitally, but the paper doesn't need to be recycled. That's a completely appropriate use of the computer. During the dialogue that was going on about whether that was appropriate, some people expressed suspicion, hostility, about the fact that somebody would have an open computer on the table at a meeting. What were they doing? I rejected that sort of criticism, because having a computer open at a meeting for use to look for resources, to look at data that's being provided is a completely appropriate way to go. And it's been a mainstay at school board meetings when I was on the school board for years. There was a separate issue, Janet, that we confronted this past year, because select board member, and it's the same guy, you know, he does a great job, but what he was doing was having side communications with people during the meeting. And as a public board, we're subject to the open meeting law. And having a separate conversation going on between a board member and somebody who was not present at the meeting, and then having contributions through that board member to the meeting as a whole, ran a significant risk of violating the open meeting law. One of the most important things that we deal with is open government. It was one of the first things that I actually took a stand on when I joined the board last March, We want to make sure that government is open and transparent in all respects. And having side communications going on from somebody not in attendance at a board meeting with a board member ran the risk of violating the open meeting law. So we did agree that we're not going to have side communications at board meetings. Computers are available, they're used for reviewing materials, but individual people can't communicate with single board members during an open meeting. That would violate the open meeting law. That's what happened, and that was the resolution.
Catherine, some comments on social network?
I don't know, I wasn't on the board. I kind of heard,
Well,
it's other than the fact that I found out about it and what was going on.
the question really isn't about that particular
Okay.
event, but how social networking influences and changes the way you function as an elected representative.
I think it's terrific idea.
How does
I
it
love
affect
it.
you?
I'm on the Development Review Board, and I have to tell you, the paper that we get on the Development Review Board is unbelievable. I mean, we can get packets with building plans and just, I mean, some packets could be, 25, 30 pages. It's unreal. So now I get mine emailed to me. And to me, it's kind of like saving the landfill, you know?
Maybe I'm not making myself clear, because the issue of social networking is sharing ideas using computer, so that maybe not at the meeting, as David very clearly explained how that doesn't
Right,
fit,
would not be a good
but
idea.
how it would affect how people know what you're doing and influence or not influence your role as a select board member if you were elected.
Oh, I would definitely have my email address out there for people to email me if they had thoughts, if I was on the select board, of their feelings. I mean, it's kind of like, Dick was saying that he ran into somebody paying their taxes that didn't know that there was an election going on. I would find it would be easy for people to sit down at the computer and email you. I mean, there are people who still have, snail mail. But, yeah, I would find that to be a wonderful way to communicate with the people of Brattleboro.
Thank you. Dick?
Well, I'm not a tweeter, and I'm not a Facebooker.
I was very careful about not using
I was gonna
specific
say.
names.
I think it's okay for the municipality to have a Facebook page for communication, getting things out there. It's the biggest social network in the world, and the issue of availability, I think, to your constituents. Obviously, email is something that all of us have. Our email addresses are on the webpage, brattleboro.org. Our phone numbers are on the webpage. We find that elderly people are less likely to have computers and use the phone more readily than a computer to keep in contact with you, or face-to-face. So I'm not opposed to anyone or anybody on the board having a Facebook page. Actually, I think that Ken does. I'm not sure about David or Christopher, if they do or if they tweet. It's it's in vogue at this time, and there'll be something else coming down the road. So it is somewhat humorous. I'm the old-style guy. It's you can get me with my email, and I don't even text much on my phone. You can leave me messages, but other than that, go ahead, Christopher.
Social media is really just another term for an additional means of communication. I'm reminded of a story I read within the last year in the New York Times about, or someplace like that, about when the telephone was invented. Lawyers didn't like it because they felt that it would that it could threaten the confidentiality of their communications with clients. This was 100 years ago. And Of course, people talk with their attorneys over the phone now. And we have fax, and we have email, and we have delivery services for physical paper as never before. FedEx does 1 billion pieces a day. And it used to be that that's what the post office did, only they do 5 billion a day. I think that boiling this down to the Brattleboro Select Board or in politics, making yourself available to constituents by any medium is appropriate. As I said earlier, many people feel overwhelmed by the complexity, the number of issues, the number of complex issues, broad, deep, minute, and whatever it takes to help foster understanding, good communication is okay with me. Anything can be abused. I had an interesting chat when I was in college with somebody once who asserted that you can't have evil without good, and the analogy drawn was you can't have a rip in a tablecloth without the tablecloth. So we have this medium. It's a wonderful thing. It can be abused, and we have to watch out for that. We have to sew the rents in the tablecloth back up. We have to make sure, as David was indicating, and I quite agree, that you want to avoid problems with the open meeting law, because this is pure democracy, and the trust in our society, the trust in our elected representatives starts here. This is where the buck starts, and at the same time, it's where it stops. So I'd say that the answer I'm giving is really kind of broad, I realize, but social media, it's just fine, matters how you use it. Good judgment, once again, as with anything else, is in order.
Okay. I have one last question, and I'll ask people to be a little bit more brief, to allow 1.5 minutes for each of you to address voters at the end, and then I will speak a little bit more about the election coming up, about the League of Women Voters, and really appreciate the fact that as you talk about media, BCTV makes so much of this possible. So the last question, I think we'll just go back in reverse. We'll start with you, Christopher.
Uh-oh.
What difference do you think you can make as a select board member in Brattleboro, where government appears to be divided among the town manager, the representative town meeting, and the various boards and commissions?
Well, you've said the word divided. I don't see that this is a divided community. I think there is a division that is entirely appropriate, that creates checks and balances in terms of opinion, in terms of power, in terms of execution. Very appropriate. I have no criticism of the way that we, as Brattleboro, are organized as a town. I think it's working very well right now. This is a really good time to be running for office because the town is so well managed. And you can see how well managed it is by how well we've dealt with controversy and disaster. Brattleboro, here's a bottom line issue that I've been toying with, that I've been worried about for a number of years, and that is our representative town meeting an appropriate means of government to a community that is really not so much a town as a small city? And so far, I come down on the side of the status quo. Brattleboro is a special case of the town meeting being a representative town meeting. It's kind of a hybrid, where the budget is approved by representatives, but who are town meeting representatives, tweaking the old mold. And we're a town, however, because we're in Vermont, in a valley, in a community that survives by having its members help one another out, beginning with pushing each other out of snowbound ditches. This is how we have to live. This is how we do live. This is a very strong culture we have here. I like being a part of the leadership and government of it because it's so rewarding to carry on a tradition. It's so very rewarding to see a little progress that I can say, I helped with that, or I supported that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did ask you to be brief, please.
That's all right.
You know, I would concur with Christopher. We have an excellent town manager. We have outstanding department heads. That was very evident last year. Any one issue can get the town up in a uproar. and you never know what that is. That's one of the difficult things about serving on the Select Board. You have no idea what's going to get under somebody's skin, and at any given time, you can have 50 people coming to a board meeting talking to you about something that they got excited about. It's the scariest thing about being a board member, actually, is public participation, because you have no idea what people are going to talk about. The agenda is set, but it's public participation. So I see our town as a very cohesive unit. There are issues that come up and will continue to come up long after we're gone, and they will divide us, but they will also bring us back together. And they need to bring us back together, because a community divided does not do well. We have had issues in the past. I believe that I have made a tremendous difference in our community, serving for the past 6 years. As I said earlier this evening, we're in the best financial shape. I can't take the credit for that solely, and don't try to, but the fact that things that I push for have us in a much better place financially than we have been in many, many a year. And I'm proud of that.
You are going to have a minute and a half at the very
Okay.
end to address the voters. Catherine, what difference do you think you can make as a Select Board member in Brattleboro, where government appears to be divided among the town manager, the representative town meeting, and various boards and commissions?
I guess, I wanted to relieve this impression, apparently, that it seems to have picked up, that I would not represent the entire town. What I mean is that I am a retired person. I do live on a limited income, and I would bring that aspect to the Select Board. I have been on the DRB for 4 years, and believe me, I understand what Dick is saying. We just went through the whole Melrose thing, and I had many people wanted to grab me when I left the building because they knew I was on the board.
And I'm going to ask you also,
So-
when you say DRB, if you'll translate
Development
that.
Review Board.
Okay, thank you.
Right, sorry. I also have to agree that, I've been behind that camera when we've had Select Board meetings going on for BCTV and the Planning Board, and even with some of the differences that have come across when we've had when the public has been here for the Select Board, I have to commend the Select Board on their being able to balance everything out. And I think that is what's important. You have to learn how to balance. And this wouldn't be the first board that I'm on, and like I said last night, if I don't win, I'm not going away. I plan to still represent District 3, so I can bring that as well.
Thank you. David?
Janet, I think that the Select Board, the town manager and town administration, and town meeting, town representatives, all play complementary roles as opposed to having divided government and divided power. It's the role of the Select Board to provide direction and oversight for the town government. It's the role of the town manager to execute, to work the town government, and to oversee all the employees of the town on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the budgets we recommend for adoption at town meeting are being spent, that the money is being spent appropriately, that all the functions of town government are working on a day-to-day basis. The primary role of the chair of the Select Board is not just to supervise that and to moderate at our biweekly meetings, but also to be that primary point of contact between the town manager and the Select Board. And so I think that what I can bring best to the Select Board in my role as a member is to help provide even and reasonable and well-intentioned review of the issues that come in front of us in order to act in the best interests of the town. That's how we've been acting over the course of this last year through very difficult times, and I hope that we can continue to work together in that same way.
Thank you very much. And as Chris Chapman said, we are really very sorry that the other candidate for the one-year seat, William Morlock, hasn't been able to join us this evening. But we will continue with each candidate addressing you voters directly, asking for your vote, and then I will talk a little bit about the League of Women Voters. So let's start, just, Chris, alphabetically.
Why I should be elected? That's what you want to know?
That's what I want to know.
Okay.
And give you a chance to tell the voters directly why you should be elected.
People elected me last year because I had promised that I would do my best to help, to draw an analogy, to keep the plane flying straight and level, which is very difficult to do when you have winds of change buffeting you, when you have smoke and fire and flood, when you have all kinds of controversy. Fortunately, we didn't bring up nuclear power tonight. For whatever, traffic lights, we barely touched on that. Those were hot button issues last year. You want, well, Brattleboro is in essence, and I'll just repeat the analogy I drew at last night's candidate forum. Brattleboro's citizens are riding, in essence, in one of those new Dreamliners. We go down the runway, we take off, and then suddenly we're really on our own, subject to our own laws of physics, the laws of politics. What we want to do is to keep all the passengers safe. We want to navigate all the hazards, avoid them, and we want to land safely. We've done that. I want to continue to be a part of a team that has that kind of record of accomplishment, of working together, bringing new ideas into play in a practical way. You know, I'm a native of the town. I love living here. When I moved back in 1991, I felt I was coming back to having won the right to what I want in retirement 35 to 40 years early. I still feel that way. I want to preserve this marvelous community that really requires a complex involvement. And if the select board is anything, it is a complex involvement. I would hope to be reelected for one more term. My son reminded me when I decided to run again, he said, "Dad, you asked me to remind you that I was supposed to tell you that I was only going to run for 1 year. And so I'm telling you that, but I hope you win." And because it's been such a source of satisfaction. I just ask that people vote for my re-election so that I can continue to work for our fair city. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Dick?
Thank you. Thank you, League of Women Voters. Thank you, Janet, for your fine coordinating here of the questions. Common sense. I think I bring that to the board, a level-headedness. I think I've demonstrated that over the 6 years that I have served you. I think that I've showed you that I'm not afraid to stand in front of you with controversial issues, listen to you, and then make a decision and deal with the outcome of that decision. You don't make a lot of friends in this board, but as Christopher said, there are many people that come up to you and thank you for doing a thankless job. It is the most rewarding job, as I said last evening, that I've ever done. And I'm forever grateful for throwing my name in and getting elected. I was humbled in victory as I was humbled in defeat. I had the same feeling when I lost as I ran for the select board as when I won. I plan to work hard for you as I have in the past 6 years. I believe that the board, the existing board, with all due respect to Catherine, and I respect all the things that she does, and Bill, that Christopher and Dave are just outstanding people for the board. And I'm going to vote for Christopher. But I want you to vote for me also, because I'm not running here to be the odd man out. And I know that there's a potential for one of us is going to lose, and that could be me. I hope not, but it's not fatal. And I hope that I have your continued support, because a lot of you have encouraged me to run when I didn't think that I was going to run. But I'm glad I'm here, and I want to serve you for one more year, so thank you very much, and again, thank you, League of Women Voters.
And now for the three-year seat, and again, we're doing it alphabetically, so David will put you next.
Thank you, Janet. I'm David Gartenstein, and I'm running for the three-year term for the Select Board. I first moved here to Brattleboro 30 years ago, and I've raised my family here. I've sent my kids to the Brattleboro schools. I've worked here, and I've participated in local government for a period that's running on now 2 decades. I want to thank everybody who's watched this forum. I want to thank everybody who's participated in our town government this year. And I want to thank everybody who's going to be voting on March 6th. I'd like to continue serving on the Select Board for 3 years more in order to continue the progress that we've made over this difficult year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Catherine.
Catherine Turn is the second. Yes, and my mother's name. I moved to Brattleboro 7 years ago and immediately got involved. I became a town rep for District 2. I joined the Development Review Board right away as an alternate, and since then was elected to the 3 years. I have to say that I am just overwhelmed by the fact of the town government. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I grew up in New Jersey, so you didn't have much say of what went on until you went into that voting booth, because there was no town representation, and I think that's a great thing. I would love to have you vote for me. I am new at the job, but I think that I could bring to it a perspective. And even if I win, which would be a wonderful thing, I still will continue to pack the Meals for Wheels at the senior center. I will still continue to volunteer at the library. And if I don't win, I will still continue to do those and also represent District 3 at the town meeting. And thank you very much to the League. This is a marvelous thing. Thank you.
Thank you all. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I thank you for viewing and listening to this conversation with the candidates. This year, the League of Women Voters celebrated 92 years of being a nonpartisan political organization that neither supports nor opposes political candidates or parties. It is an organization devoted to encouraging informed and active participation in government, working to increase an understanding of major public policy issues, and influencing public policy through education and advocacy. Despite our name, since 1973, any person of voting age, male or female, is invited to become a League member. And I'm delighted to know that one of the members of your Select Board is a League member, and I must admit I'm probably not above suggesting that everybody consider it. Locally, our Southeast Vermont unit of the Vermont State League of Women Voters meets regularly and studies state and national issues. For example, our recent study on transportation. And this year we did a follow-up on that in funding on transportation, so that we really do have an opportunity to influence by informing people the major issues. Our programs are listed in the Reformer, BCTV, and other information sources in Brattleboro. We welcome you to join and be active in changing yourself and your community. Tuesday, March 6th is the day we vote for 3 Select Board candidates, for town meeting representatives and other officials. Voting hours are 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the high school gymnasium. All 3 districts vote at the same place. Since there's no school that day, it would be a good time to bring your children so they can experience democracy in action. To be eligible to vote, you will have to be registered by 5 p.m. Tuesday, February 29th. You can register at the town clerk's office here in the Brattleboro Town Hall. That's also where you can pick up an absentee ballot for yourself until 5 p.m. on Monday, March 5th. And there are already absentee ballots now available. You can telephone or mail requests to the town clerk's office. You can stop in yourself, pick up a ballot, and you can vote your own ballot right then, take it home to somebody, and have it mailed back. And if you are homebound and need assistance in voting, someone from the town clerk's office will come out and bring you a ballot. So there is no reason not to be an active participant in voting for the Select Board for Brattleboro. Thank you very much.